Hello and welcome back. In the previous section, we understood about the control flow. In this section, we will be going inside our functions and we will be looking into how to define your function, what is the syntax, and what are the way Python differs from other programming language like Java or JavaScript in defining a function. We have a lot of different variety of function which you might be seeing for first time in Python, like having the use of lambda function, map, and filter. We'll be looking into some of the simple hands-on example because they will be very commonly used in our project code. So let's go ahead and look into some of the basic syntax involving functions with Python. So let's start by creating a new notebook file, and we will be naming this notebook file as functions. So let us rename this from untitled to functions. And basic syntax of function is simple. You just have to use the keyword def, and let's try to create a function called time. And what we need to also specify is parenthesis, and like in our example of control statement, here also we have to give a colon to start the definition of the function. Now we will be using tab to make Python compiler or interpreter understand that what are all the content inside the function. The function can have a return statement, so we can use a return within the function. And if the function doesn't return any value, then you will be more specifically do some of the operation within the function itself. So having return in the function is optional. So let's try to print something within this function, and I will return 0. So this is the basic definition of this function. Let's execute it and try to call the function time. And once we call the function time, then you can see that function executed got printed, and we also have the output of the function, which is 0. So I can store it in a variable. And what I will be doing is understand what is the type of a, which is going to be an integer. So let's try to run this, and you can see that the type is integer, which is returned from the function. I can also skip this return. Let me try to execute it. And if I try to execute the next line where I'm calling the function, then you can see that the function doesn't return anything and the return type is of none. So having a return value in the function is optional. Now, if you have some experience with other programming language like Java, JavaScript, or C++, then functionalities of functions are basically same. You can have local variables, global variables, and do operation over it. I will be touching on some of the unique aspect of the function. So let's try to complicate things from here. What we are going to pass is we are going to pass two arguments, a and b, to this function. And I will be basically returning a multiplied by b. So basic multiplication operation I will be doing here. So let's try to define this, and we will next be calling this function. So let's say time a, which is going to be 1, and this is 20. So it basically gives output as 20. I can pass 2, and it's to give us output 40. So this is how you can do operation on the function by passing arguments to it. And also I can have multiple arguments. So I will say star argument, and it will basically now don't have any limit over how many argument I can pass. I can pass as many argument I would like. So what I want to return basically from this function is the multiplication of all this number which I have added. So I will be saying for I in arg, which is going to be a list. I skipped the colon here. So I will be creating a variable multiplication, multiply into I, and in the top I need to define multiplication, which is going to have value 1. Now I cannot give value 0 in the initialization because then multiplication will result into 0. So this is the function definition. Now let's try to call this function with multiple values, 2, 3, and 4. So what I can also do is change this to multiplication, and what it will basically do is give you the values by multiplying all these terms. So what will be the result? Result will be 2 multiplied by 3, which is 6, and 6 multiplied by 4, which is 24. So this is the answer which we can expect. We can also have more values like 1, many ones, and again 2. This will basically make our value 48. So this is how you can pass multiple arguments into your function, and all the arguments will be actually passed on as a list. So the next thing which we will be seeing is a nested function. Imagine if we want to do this operation and we also have another function def, and this def is basically going to add, and I have also capability to pass multiple values here, and let me return addition here, and I will be basically copying the same content, and addition is basically 0 from I to argument, and I will say add I equal to add I plus I, and this is again in turn have a calculation function where I will pass 2 values, a, b, and operation. So what I will be doing, if my operation equal to plus, then return add a comma b, and what I will do here is also have a tab and have a colon. This is the thing which you will miss if you are coming from a different syntax background, and you will specifically miss this colon and also tab. So little careful here. We will be having here a else if operation is equal to a multiplication, then you have to return multiply a and b, and that will be the final thing. And if it doesn't match anything, then just return -1. So this is the entire definition. It's kind of a small calculator, and as you can see, we have a error of indentation error, and it is pointing out to this line where the for is not aligned with this add. So it's basically not able to understand what is where. So what we will basically do here is we will be aligning it properly so the Python program can understand what is part of the definition. Now when we are working with Sublime Editor, when we are creating our main Python programs, then sometimes we will be using tabs, and you have to be careful if the tab are of size 2 or are of size 4. So we will be looking into it more when we are actually working on Project Core. We will be encountering this problem a lot of time. So the indentation error is very common in Python if you are failing to really align it properly. So it will be confused basically what part of the code is inside where. So this is the final code, and let's try to run it now. And we have a syntax error in else. We missed a colon here, and let's try to run it. And what we will be doing is we will be basically calling this calculator, which is basically a small calculator, 1 and 2, and we will be basically trying to add it. So let's try to add those 2 values, and it will basically give me 3, and I can also mention star here, which is multiplication, and it will give me value 2. So in this scenario, you can see that I have called add and multiplication inside the calculator. So this is a very nice small example where we also saw the scope. You can see that we do have a variable called arg here, and we do have a variable arg here. So the scope of this variable arg is limited to the scope of this function, and the scope of this argument is limited to this function multiplication here. So this is a very common phenomena. If you have any programming background, then this will be very basics to you, but we will be starting with the basics and building up what is different in Python compared to other programming language which you have been using. The next thing which we will be seeing here is documenting your function. So if I specify some string here, multiply values for example by a j. So this is a string just before the function definition start, and also I can say adding values by a j, and also I will write it here, calculation values for example by a j. Now why I'm trying to do it, let's try to compile it and we will see why I'm doing it. So as we can see, there is an indentation error, and what we need to do is we need to basically align it to a little left side so all the alignments are proper. Let's try to execute it. And what I have not shown you yet is a function called help. So help will be basically giving you basic idea about all the functions. So if you are unfamiliar with any function, so you can call help and you specify what function you need to understand what basically they do. So let's try to execute it, and it will give you a short description about what this function does. So len is a standard defined function within Python, and here you can see that return the number of items of a sequence or collection. So in similar way, by adding this triple single quotes just before the function definition, if I now do a help for multiplication, the function which we have defined, it will basically give that definition here. Multiply values, for example, by a j. So you can also use this triple single quotes for documentation, and also if you have a big projects, then you might sometime miss the scope, and sometimes your name doesn't really suggest, or there are very common names, and multiple functions has a very common name, but the functionality differs. So you can use this technique to find out more about your function and also document it properly.
Hey there, check out UI5CN for awesome hands-on courses on enterprise technologies like SAP and more. To watch similar videos, subscribe to UI5CN YouTube channel.